We have a variety of topics to cover in today's video, including Jesse Puljujarivi being set to head over and play in Europe. Plus, we have other updates on the Edmonton Oilers, Winnipeg Jets, Florida Panthers, Ottawa Senators, New York Rangers, and the Philadelphia Flyers. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. We have some news, injuries, rumors, and a variety of things to cover today. So let's dive right in and get started with the Edmonton Oilers and RFA forward Jesse Puljujarivi, who has signed a one-year contract to play over with Karpat, who's a Finnish team over in Liiga. Obviously, there is a clause, though, which allows him out of that contract to come back to North America and play in the NHL should he obtain an NHL contract. Obviously, he's in a situation with the Oilers that we've discussed many times over, that he wants out, he wants a fresh start, he wants the Oilers to trade him to another NHL club, and while he's waiting for that, there's already been talks and threats of it to play over in Europe, but now he officially has a contract and appears set to do that if he's not traded. And really, to be honest, it might actually be the best thing for him if he's not traded to play over there. It's a league where he could probably be a little bit more comfortable, continue to develop, improve his skills, get his confidence back, and maybe come back to the NHL next year with some increased confidence, maybe get a fresh start at that point and kind of reprove himself. Might be good for the Oilers too, because it might be able to boost his value up here a little bit. So we'll see if he actually plays over there, but it is remotely possible he doesn't even end up playing one single game if he ends up being traded by Edmonton and signing a new contract with the NHL club before their season gets underway. Then it might all be for naught, but I guess we will see. But for right now, he's got his contract and he's ready to play over in Liiga should he not be traded before the NHL season gets underway. So I guess we'll stay tuned to see on that and if that actually ends up happening or not. Now, sticking with the Oilers here temporarily, Connor McDavid, obviously one of the best players in the world, Oilers captain, ended his season on a not so good note with a knee injury, and he did do an interview here in the last day or two discussing the rehab and the process. He ended up having a torn PCL, and he's not quite ready to go here as of yet, but he is working hard to hopefully be ready for training camp. But at this point, you can't guarantee that he will be available at the start of training camp. He said that he wants to be able to take his time, make sure that it's healed 100% so that he doesn't end up re-injuring it, and that he's good to go and can move forward. So we'll see if McDavid is ready for camp or not. I would suspect more than likely he'd be ready for the opener of the season, even if he does miss a little bit of training camp. I would think an athlete of his caliber would be able to bounce back a little bit quicker than most, but at the same time, because of that injury, I'm sure a lot of his off-season training has not been able to be at the extent it normally would. So I guess we will see how McDavid makes out and if he can start training camp on time or not, but that injury's not 100% healed, but hopefully we'll be good to go here in a few weeks' time by the time camp opens. Now, the Winnipeg Jets have signed veteran forward Gabriel Bourque to a one-year, two-way contract as well, $700K in the NHL, $350K in the American Hockey League. So it's quite a handsome salary to play in the minors if necessary. And I guess right now for Bourque, it really depends on how the Jets kind of reshape and finish out their roster here. Obviously, they still have big-time RFAs, Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor not signed. And a lot of that's going to depend, obviously, on the negotiations, how things go. We've seen numerous reports on both and how things really haven't progressed as well as either side would have hoped by now. But I guess if Bourque ends up in the NHL or AHL, either way, at least it gives them flexibility with somebody who's got some NHL experience. He's played a lot in the Central Division over the years as well. We'll see, but either way, a decent depth signing there by the Jets. Now, the Florida Panthers have also come to terms with restricted free agent forward Dennis Malgin on a one-year, one-way contract at $700K as well. He will still be a restricted free agent with arbitration rights at this time next year. Last year, Malgin ended up playing 50 games, put up 16 points. We'll see how he does this year. Certainly, the Panthers have a pretty stacked forward group. I don't imagine he's going to be able to get a ton of opportunity. Plus, they have some more prospects coming out of junior to compete for spots as well, including Owen Tippett, Alexei Heponiemi, etc. Plus, they still got guys like Borgstrom trying to get fully established as a full-timer. So he's certainly going to have a lot of competition to keep an NHL spot, but he is under contract with the Panthers for one more year and will have arbitration rights next summer. Now, as we've seen recently, the Ottawa Senators extended forward Colin White on a 6-year contract. Now their focus turns to defenseman Thomas Chabot, who they're attempting to work out a contract extension for. Comments from GM Pierre Dorion basically indicated that they're aware that their young core is becoming a big part of this team and a big part of their future, and that it's important for them to kind of get some of these guys locked up on longer term deals for right now. Obviously, getting White done was a pivotal contract for them. Kind of sends the right message. Obviously, Colin White's close friends with a lot of the other younger players on the team as well. But now the White's locked up, the Chabot extension becomes that much more important. Of course, he's not a restricted free agent until next summer, so there's not a ton of urgency, but it would be nice for them to get this out of the way early if possible. Obviously, we don't know how Chabot's agent and team feel about this, but a lot of players don't like to negotiate during the season just because they find it a distraction. I'm not sure how he feels about that, but quite often if these things don't get settled by the time the season starts, they usually get put on the back burner until the season ends. And then, of course, we've seen how a lot of the RFA contract negotiations have gone this year. Certainly something they try to like to avoid, but if they can get Chabot locked up on a 5, 6, 7-year contract, longer term, he could be the cornerstone of that blue line for many years to come. Would be a big win and give some positive news here for Sens fans who have dealt with a lot over the last year or two. The White signing was a nice plus. They can get Chabot signed as well. Then obviously that'll be a little bit of encouragement that some of these guys are willing to stick around for the long haul. Quick updates here on a couple of Philadelphia Flyers restricted free agents that remain unsigned, including forward Travis Konechny and defenseman Ivan Provorov. Of course, both those guys are big parts of their team. Provorov likely to be a top pair defenseman. Konechny, top 6 winger for sure, maybe even a top line winger, depending on how they slot him with the other forwards there. So they're very important pieces to this team. Both remain unsigned. Recent comments from new GM Chuck Fletcher indicate he's not too concerned here as of yet, but obviously he said that he felt that as the training camp gets closer and closer, that there will be a little bit more urgency on both sides to find a deal. He indicated, though, like many other NHL clubs are facing a similar circumstance, that he's kind of waiting for the market to set itself so they can hopefully get these guys under contract. It's been reported that Konechny is likely going to be looking at a shorter term deal, probably 2 or 3 years, somewhere around $4 to $4.5 million. And Ivan Provorov, depending on the term, likely ends up somewhere around the $7 million mark. Of course, 2 years ago, he had a phenomenal year and then really regressed last year, but I guess we'll see how much that plays into the contract, because obviously the Flyers as a decor, as a team, did not have a solid year last year at all and had a lot of regression across the board. So I'm not sure how much that'll impact the Provorov contract. A lot of these RFAs coming out of their entry-level deals are being paid on future projections and what they're likely going to be in a few years' time. So if they still have a ton of confidence in his abilities, but based on what they saw in the first few years of the entry-level deal, then certainly I think he deserves probably around $7 million. Seems fair. And if we can get a Provorov contract signing, that very well might help settle some of the other RFA defensemen around the league, like Werenski, McAvoy, Carlo, etc. There's not a ton of D-men that are without contract, and once we see one domino fall, that should hopefully help set the market for the others and get a lot of these guys under contract here before training camp starts. Most training camps start between 2 to 3 weeks time from now, so I guess we will see how all this goes, but there should be a lot of RFA news, I would think, in the coming weeks here before camps get underway. Now, some other news here on the New York Rangers, based on athletic writer Rick Carpinello, indicates that he feels that Chris Kreider likely is still going to be traded, even though we haven't seen a Kreider move as of yet. He likely plays most of the year, if not all year, with the New York Rangers, depending on their situation. That he feels that the odds of him being traded before he becomes a free agent are really good. Obviously, a deadline deal very well could be something that we see, especially if the New York Rangers are not heading into the playoffs. But obviously the Rangers are going to be greatly improved with all the moves they made between the youngsters coming in. They obviously signed Panarin, they picked up Jacob Trouba. This team could be drastically better this year, so it'd be hard to imagine selling off a player of Kreider's capabilities near the deadline to kind of weaken their team, heading into the playoffs after missing for the few years. So not really sure how they're going to go about that. They could decide to use Kreider as like their own rental, but either way, he feels that he's likely looking for a new contract around the $7 million mark, which might prove to be too much money for the Rangers to take on a longer term deal for somebody who's 29 years old with all the other younger players that they're trying to build around. So either way, he feels it's unlikely that Kreider returns to the Rangers next year, and it only makes sense that they trade him or his rights before that happens to make sure they get something back in return. And they also have a couple of restricted free agents right now, including defenseman Tony DeAngelo and forward Brendan Lemieux, who they acquired from the Jets last year at the deadline in that Kevin Hayes trade. Both of them are still looking at their qualifying offers, which they likely need to sign in order to play. The Rangers do not appear to be budging here. I think both players were expecting more than just what the qualifying offer mark, a little over $800,000, was going to be. But the Rangers are in a tough cap situation right now and don't really have a whole lot of other money they can throw at either of these guys. I do think it's more likely that if they did kind of budge on either one of them here, likely would be DeAngelo, who's a little bit more proven with this team, that they might maybe increase their offer there a little bit to get him signed. I think it's more important based on their overall roster that he's going to be able to play a bigger role. Obviously, their blue line, it's certainly an area that could be very well improved. Adding a guy like Trouba in there, but they don't have enough NHL bodies really without DeAngelo. It certainly does weaken the blue line. So I do think getting him signed is just a little bit more important. I think Lemieux played a nice role for them as well and certainly contributed, and certainly a player who they can find useful in playing that bottom six for them for sure. But at the same time, they have a lot more forwards. It's a stronger area for the team. So I guess if they're going to play hardball with anybody, probably more likely would be Brendan Lemieux, who's still trying to get himself established as a regular NHL player after being drafted in 2014. There was also another point here in his article talking about the possibility of offer sheets on DeAngelo or Lemieux, because obviously the offer sheets would not have to be overly high, but he doesn't really feel that that's going to be something that the Rangers are too concerned about. Obviously the compensation that teams would have to give up for some of these guys would be pretty much either nothing or next to nothing, and even though teams might be tempted to pull that off, that the Rangers likely would match, because it wouldn't take a lot of juggling on their roster to make the necessary moves to find the cap space to get them under contract. So obviously, I don't see another team coming in and offering like $3, $4, $5 million or something like that to these players. So even though an offer sheet threat does kind of exist because of their tight cap situation, Carpiniello doesn't really feel that it's something that the Rangers are overly concerned about and would likely match. But as we've discussed before, some of these teams that are heading close to training camp with unsigned RFAs, I think do become a bigger threat for an offer sheet, but right now there's just not a ton of teams that have the required space to really make a big splash in that regard, as a lot of their dollars have been used up here in other contracts. So we will see amongst the teams that do have the space. Could we see one? It is a possibility. Hard to say who they target and what happens, but things are going to heat up and get very interesting as we head into training camp here coming soon in the next couple of weeks. So of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions on everything we discussed here today. We'll continue the conversation down in the comment section. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos. We have daily hockey content here all year round. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.